IVM.
Life is awesome when you have a reliable friend who guides you to take the right decisions. Likewise, at Paytm Money, our expert-designed investment packs enable you to invest in the right mutual funds that suit your risk profile. These packs are a well-diversified portfolio of 3 to 5 mutual funds that gives you the best combination of wealth creation and safety of capital. Paytm Money Advisory Team follows a robust process to pick these funds after closely monitoring the performance of these funds to ensure delivering optimal risk-adjusted returns at all times. Start an SIP today in the investment packs and watch your wealth multiply over the long run. Download the Paytm Money app from the Play Store, get your KYC done instantly, and become investment ready within minutes to pick your right fund. Folks, welcome to Paisa Vaisa. I'm your host Anupam Gupta P50 on Twitter, and this is a very special episode because for the first time we are going to be discussing infrastructure investment trusts, or InvITs in particular. I have never covered this topic. Believe me, I really wanted to, because it's a very unique form of investments, and I'm thrilled to have one of them, as in one of the InvITs, on my show. So a big welcome to the IndiGrid Investment Trust. I have with me Harsh Shah, CEO, IndiGrid InvIT. Harsh, welcome to Paisa Vaisa. Thank you so much for doing it with us. You've got this. Thank you. So you've got this really extensive background in infrastructure. I just had a look at your website, and you're the CFO of Sterlite Power. Just focus to your background, and what attracted you towards the IndiGrid InvIT.
Okay, thanks, Anupam. So I was with Sterlite Power, and when I was at Sterlite Power, we started IndiGrid. Sterlite Power was the sponsor of IndiGrid. So as such, I didn't join a new company, but I created it at the time of my role as Chief Financial Officer at Sterlite Power. Subsequently, last year, there's a change in control that happened when the manager of IndiGrid was taken over majority by KKR. And along with that, I moved to the manager with a full-time role with no dual responsibility and dedicated to IndiGrid. So for me, it was a very smooth transition to the new role in the similar business. So I've been in the same business for about 8 years now.
So, pardon I'm just very thrilled to have someone who's so different, right? Because on my show, I've had like fintech startups and all that, and people who are already into personal finance. So whenever I have, you're literally the first guy who's come from the infrastructure side. So I see that you're an engineer and you're an MBA. What attracted you, to say, I will not go into finance, I will not go into any other area, but I'll go into infrastructure, just as a general icebreaker to our listeners.
Sure. So I think I did study electrical engineering, and I never thought that I would be leading an electrical company, right? So at the end of the day, IndiGrid is nothing but a transmission utility, and I can think of all the subjects that I studied in engineering. So I think that's something which just the fate has it for me. But I think what interested was to create something new, which didn't exist in India at that time. So REITs and InvITs are a business trust, as they are called, a $1 trillion industry across the world. And when I joined the infrastructure sector about a decade back, everybody spoke about attracting global pension funds and low cost capital to make infrastructure financing viable in India. But it was just a talk. And we had an aspiration when I joined Sterlite Power to build something which can actually become a reality for transforming Indian infrastructure financing. So what the current role, or rather IndiGrid offers, is a best of infrastructure financing as well as infrastructure itself as a utility. So it has a cross-section of technology, finance, and infrastructure. So I think it gives the best of all three. It's a unique business.
Yeah. Fantastic. So you just gave me a great lead into my next question. You said that across the world, the concept of an InvIT, an infrastructure investment trust, is like trillions of dollars, because institutional money, like pension funds, would love to invest in something like this. In India, of course, the concept is new. From a retail perspective, also, the concept of an InvIT is not really well known out here, because infrastructure financing in India is typically an institutional business. You have loans typically from banks and NBFCs that are the main way of financing these long-term projects, because infrastructure means it's a very long-term project. So let's start with this. What exactly is an InvIT? What is the structure? who are the various parties involved? And you can, even give us a global perspective once you're done with the India side as to how this route of financing is actually very big.
Sure, sure. So before I go, I'll just take 1 minute to explain the global perspective also. Globally, most of these InvITs or the business trusts are owned by people directly, not via institutions. And retail is a huge participant because there are no banks giving 4 and 6% FDs over there, right? Across the world. And therefore, people actually make financially savvy decisions. And these kind of platforms are far more liquid with retail participation, not necessarily institutions. But we'll talk about it later as we go back from India back to world. So, what an InvIT is nothing but a well-governed or more regulated listed company. In simple words, right? It has a body of a mutual fund because it is a trust in legal sense, but it has the corporate governance of a company with far greater unit holder or shareholder rights. So, in a simple word, it is a greatly regulated and well-governed listed company, which is in a focused business. Now, if I go into slightly bit of more nuances, so why is this unique, right, for Indian infrastructure financing? The first point, it is regulated by SEBI, and it comes with its necessary conditions that it needs to follow throughout its life. First one being, it can only own infrastructure assets in India. So, as a business, we can't diversify in something which is not infrastructure in India, right? Within that, also, we need to provide a very objective clause at the time of listing that what are we going to own. And most of the InvITs listed today are very, very specific, right? We own transmission line and subsequently probably renewable projects. Somebody else will own roads. There are little or no InvIT which says we will only own anything, right, in infrastructure. So it provides a transparent communication to its investors that what are we getting into, right? Second, it is a collective ownership of assets, right? So what SEBI requires is, especially for listed InvIT, that we can only own projects or assets which are operating in nature. So about at any point in time, we cannot own more than 10% of our assets which are in under construction projects. Why is this important? It is important because the real risk of infrastructure investment is at the time of development, where there are higher risks with respect to clearance, construction, financing, etc. However, the idea to build InvIT as a focused business was to focus on operating projects and generate yield for investors. So therefore, SEBI, instead of giving that right or decision making to the board of InvIT, they mandated it as a regulation that one cannot own more than 10% of under construction project. Right?
Sure.
So you have a focused business model. You have within focused business model, you need to play in a very safe spectrum of investment, which is operating projects. And the third one is that you cannot have leverage more than 49% at a consolidated level. Now, this is very important because most of the companies or infrastructure companies or any other businesses in India do not have such mandatory cap, right? Which has in the past and even current resulted into its own perils. So there is a mandatory consolidated cap of leverage. If you are managing very good assets and a AAA rating, you can go up to 70%, but never above 70%. So you have a focused business, only operating projects, and a cap on leverage, right? So what that does is de-risks the business of owning infrastructure assets in India. Right? So that's one big differentiator. I also spoke about shareholder rights and unit holder rights. Unlike companies, majority of decisions that InvIT takes or the manager of InvIT takes is in the hands of unit holders. So if we acquire a large project, we go for unit holder vote. If we borrow more than 25%, we go for unit holder vote. If we start charging more fees, we need to go for unit holder vote. So at every point in time, there is a substantial amount of checks for unit holder vote, which is nothing but shareholder rights, which provides a better corporate governance. The last part is to describe who are the actors, right? Who are the kind of people in the overall scheme of things. So the first is the InvIT itself, which is the trust. The second most important is the manager of the InvIT. So in our case, for example, I am employed or rather employee of the manager. The manager's role is nothing but managing the entire InvIT and operate it like a company. So manager is separated from the company or the InvIT itself, unlike a normal company where manager is employee of the company. The second important role is of trustee. Because this is a trust, there is always an independent trustee which oversees the action of the manager. Like in a mutual fund, there is a manager company, you see a lot of them listed. Then there is a trustee of the fund, and the role of the trustee is to ensure that manager is acting as per the debenture, as per the trust deed and in line with SEBI regulations. So there is an added check of compliance and governance from the trustee. The third entity which is involved is something called a sponsor. The sponsor is the entity which launched the InvIT at inception and contributed its first few assets, right, to start with. Sponsor's role is largely restricted to launch the InvIT, to take it public, sell the assets, and maintain a minimum shareholding of 15% for first 3 years. Other than that, all the role which is in a normal company of an executive or a board is entrusted to the manager. Sponsor has just acted as a father figure who made the InvIT happen on day one. Subsequent to that, the manager is the person in charge and in control. So there are these three key actors on the InvIT, which is the manager, the trustee, and the sponsor. And the first two, being the manager and the trustee, are the most active players who runs the business of the InvIT. I'll take a pause
Sure. I mean, it's so much like an AMC, right? I mean, so when you said it, you're the manager, I'm assuming that you're the AMC. The trustee is a concept that is the same. There's a trustee in an AMC, there's trustee in an InvIT. And the sponsor is also the same. There you have a sponsor for a mutual fund and you've got a sponsor for an InvIT. So those three, so I get that, that tripartite kind of overlay of various people at the top of an InvIT. I guess it improves the governance, right?
That's right. So one is once the regulation itself locks you down to what you can do. So it improves the business and the outcomes. Second is these three parties and their roles improves the governance.
So in case of a mutual fund, the shares that are bought and sold are done by the AMC because they have the fund managers, they have the analysts, and they make the decisions of buying and selling the shares. So in that sense, the assets are, held by the AMC. How does this structure work in an InvIT? I mean, A, what are the assets? And B, who holds them?
Good point. So I'll just differentiate now between mutual fund and InvITs. So mutual fund's core business is to own liquid securities, right? Which is shares or bonds or something like that. Whereas for InvITs, core business is to own infrastructure assets, right? Now, therefore, we don't buy listed securities of listed companies and bonds. We buy unlisted infrastructure assets, which are sticky and buy it for long term. The entire analysis of the business, credit, risks, etc., is done by the manager, and the decision is taken by the unit holders. We call for an EGM and disclose that we are acquiring this asset. There's the valuation report. There's the prospectus. If you approve, we will acquire. Once the investors approve, we finance it. We borrow in the market for the trust and we acquire the asset. So here is where the mutual fund and InvITs are different. Mutual fund are in the business of buying and selling listed securities. We are largely in a business of buying infrastructure assets for long term and earn yield out of that and distribute it to our investor as a regular income.
Wonderful. So, the role of mutual funds in the stock market is very, it is extremely useful because they are the guys who provide liquidity. They are the guys that provide this route for an individual like me to start an SIP and actually invest in companies without really buying the stock. I'm actually going by the mutual fund. So that gives me a level of comfort. The mutual fund, when it buys and sells shares, it actually creates a lot of liquidity in the market, which is critical for price discovery, right? So what would be a similar way to look at InvITs? Their importance and their role.
Yeah. So I think, see, the important part over here is that our core role is to acquire the project and earn an income and distribute it,
Hmm.
versus mutual fund who buys the securities and sells it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Understood. And there are quite a few InvITs in India. I mean, not all of them are listed. Not all of them are publicly listed. That is. So, could you just give us a flavor of the overall scene? Because SEBI's page, I think, has some 9 or 10 different InvITs, but I don't think there are so many of them that are listed. Can you just walk us through that?
Sure. So there are three types of InvITs that exist. Which one can think of? One is listed and publicly owned. Second is listed but privately owned. And third is unlisted and privately owned, right?
Sure.
Most of the InvITs, I think we have now all three types of InvITs in the market. First one being listed and publicly owned, which goes through like a normal equity listing and IPO, and then almost follows the normal ICDR and other regulations. So we have IndiGrid, which is publicly listed and publicly owned. We have IRB InvIT, which is listed and publicly owned. On the private side, there are InvITs like Ind InfraVIT, which was sponsored by L&T, and there are other InvITs as well. So between these three types of InvITs, from the retail participation and institutional participation perspective, the listed one obviously are more liquid because you can buy easily on the exchanges and sell, and therefore it offers convenience. And unlisted ones are largely with either large institutional investors who want to buy and hold and never have liquidity, right? So that's a different business. Sure. But within the listed sphere, I think, and if you look at from a governance standard and risk perspective as well, the listed ones follow a more stringent regulatory and governance framework versus unlisted one. Besides that, the another way to look at InvITs is the assets that they own, right? And it's very important. Typically, people make mistake in comparing InvITs versus InvITs, whereas in reality, InvITs is nothing but a better way of owning a business, right?
Correct.
And therefore, the underlying operating business is more important, both from a risk and reward perspective, right? So, for example, IndiGrid, which is focused on owning utility assets, should be compared to a listed utility company vis-a-vis a listed road InvIT, right? Because the underlying is completely different. Underlying risks are completely different, right? And this is one differentiation which I would say that investors took some time to understand for first couple of years. Now I believe most of the investors in general, educated investors, have understood the difference that the InvIT is not a comparison, but the real business under the InvIT needs to be looked at to evaluate the opportunity as well as the risk.
So if I've understood you right, if I were to compare an integrated InvIT, I should actually be looking like I should be comparing it to a transmission company, and there are quite a few of them listed in India.
Exactly.
Have I got that right? Okay.
Yeah, correct. And just from the information perspective, InvIT per se as an instrument, I would say, is at the cusp of an inflection point or a boom. I'll tell you why. In 2016, the first policy came out. 2017, first couple of InvITs listed, right? Since then and now, exactly 3 years, right? About 70,000 crores of assets, infrastructure assets, are managed under InvITs across transmission, road, commercial real estate, gas pipeline, telecom towers, right? Different kind of assets. Plus, most of the large global investors, right? Money managers and large pension funds as well as infrastructure funds have chosen InvITs as mode of investing and owning assets in India. What this has done is that government itself, when they are looking at their own monetization program, has compelled itself to look InvITs as a mode to monetize assets, right? So that's something which I would say in the first 3 years for any financial instrument or a platform to have this kind of success is very rare in India. So I would give kudos to SEBI and all the regulators who made it work. That at the first instance, in the first 3 years of inception, you have, I would say, top 10 of the global investors taking positions on the InvITs that are available.
Wow. Oh, yeah, that is, and you just spoke of an entire range of infrastructure assets, right? You said transmission, you said roads, you said commercial real estate, and these are core industries that that are very important from the economy's perspective also. So, last question, Harsh, in the first half of our show, just give us a global scene. How large, would say the largest InvIT be globally? Which country is it situated in? Who are the investors out there? Is it listed? Stuff like that.
Okay. Great. So I'll tell you there are about 400 listed business trust REITs InvITs across the world. Okay. With over $1 trillion market cap. The ownership would largely be by retail investors who directly own it. The largest business trust or InvIT kind of a platform, you'd be surprised to know, is in the US, and you'll all know them as a company. It is an ATC, which is a $16 billion telecom company, but it is an InvIT in the US, right? So it's well recognized across the world that when you have a yielding assets, which are operating, generating revenue, income, the risk goes down substantially, both operating risk, financing risk, and other risk. And therefore, it is best suited for ownership of distributed ownership by a wide set of investors. So across the world, be it, let's say, the biggest hubs are US, UK, Hong Kong, and Singapore, and Australia as well, where airports, pipelines, water bodies, gas pipelines, roads, power plants, renewable energy power plants, hotels are owned by these kind of platforms.
That's fantastic. And you said ATC, right? I'm assuming ATC stands for American Tower Corp.
Yes.
Yeah, it's American Rail, and ATC happens to be an REIT. So, if I've got this right, from an investment perspective, I might be better off in looking at an InvIT if I want to take an exposure to the infrastructure rather than invest directly into an infrastructure company. Because out here, I'm getting a very defined ownership structure, and my risks to that extent are probably less. It's probably the same comparison as buying a company versus buying a mutual fund. Would I be, more or less right on that?
Yeah, I would just elaborate slightly on that, Anupam, if you have time.
Sure.
See, let's go back 20 years, right? When the infrastructure started privatizing in India, we saw a boom in 2007. After that, it's been going down, right?
Yes.
The reason behind it, that even with the best of intentions of management, to deliver a predictable outcomes in an under construction project is fairly difficult. And when under construction projects are mixed with operating projects, the outcomes are not necessarily predictable for the managers to promise for the listed markets, right? Which resulted in a lot of a disruption in terms of what was investors expecting and what they got in the return, right? And therefore, a lot of people lost money in the, I would say, first 15 years in infrastructure boom in India, right? Almost like it became a bad word. However, InvITs offer you to own specific type of assets, which are operating assets, which restricts management to buy similar kind of assets and not repeat the same mistakes which in a normal conglomerate or a corporate one can make. So yes, from an owning perspective, it is a far safer bet to own an infrastructure investment trust of the same sector versus owning a company where neither you control payout ratio. Over here, we need to minimum distribute 90% of what we earn to our investors. So you don't control payout in a normal company, you don't control leverage in a normal company, you don't control expansion in a normal company. Or in InvIT, you control all three as a unit holder. So that gives you a far more stable outcome. Now, just to make a point, globally, it is not so regulated. Globally, all these things got evolved based on market experience, and good InvITs or a good REITs followed a good corporate governance instead of regulators forcing them to do that. However, in India, SEBI was so active that they went around the world in roadshow and chosen what are the faults or mistakes that global InvITs and REITs have taken place in the past, and they plugged the hole on those things in the corporate governance before they launched the regulations. And that's one of the reasons that the Indian InvIT regulations have come out to be very robust, and investors are able to put trust on that.
Fantastic. Harsh, thank you for walking our listeners through the concept and how exactly an InvIT runs. So, folks, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. We are going to talk about the IndiGrid InvIT on the other side of this break. We're going to get into specifics of the assets they own, the income they've distributed. So, everything that we learned as a concept in the first half, now we're going to apply all of that into the second half of this episode of Paisa Paisa with Harsh Shah, CEO of IndiGrid. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Hey everybody, welcome to another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. If you're not following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Paytm Money. So, a great week of shows behind us and hope that you've been catching up on as much of it as you can. We had Abhishek Bachchan on Football Shitball. Yeah, let me say that again. Abhishek Bachchan was on Football Shitball. Did I mention Abhishek Bachchan was on Football Shitball? That was a fun episode. You should definitely check that out. Really, really deep conversation about cricket and things like that. We had Vikram Kochar on Cyrus Says, talking about the platforms and stuff like what's going on over there. On the note, Maruk had spoken to Sanjay Jha, which was again a really, really interesting conversation. On Edges and Sledges, the guys are having an interesting conversation about, well, you know, what are favorite formats of cricket and things like that. So it's just really been a really, really awesome week on the network, and please do check things out. And with that, let's get you back to your show.
And welcome back to the InvIT special with IndiGrid. My guest, Harsha, CEO at IndiGrid. In the first half of this episode, we spoke about the concept of an InvIT and an infrastructure investment trust and how it's very popular globally and how it works in India. In this half, in this second part of the show, we're going to talk specifically about the IndiGrid InvIT, and Harsh is going to walk us through all the possible details. So Harsh, let's start from here. Tell us about the IndiGrid. You know, the same thing that we spoke about in the first half, who are the sponsor, the trustee, the investment manager, what are the assets, when was it listed. So let's just walk through the history of IndiGrid and the various details.
Sure. So IndiGrid got listed, let's say, first time in June 2017. And I'll just go a year before that and why it got listed. So it got listed with Sterlite Power being a sponsor. And the rationale or the idea behind that was exactly what we discussed in the first half. We believe investors need to get a good experience of investing in infrastructure business to be able to appreciate the outcomes. And therefore, when you separate the under construction risk, which is with a developer, and an operating risk, which a financial investor can take it, you will have better outcomes. And that creates a more symbiotic relationship because developer who takes under construction risk builds an asset, sells it at a better price for that risk, and pulls back that capital back into developing more assets. And operating asset investors keep earning yield for that asset for life. So this, we believe, creates a long-term symbiotic relationship which will harness more capital, both private and public, in infrastructure assets. And that was the reason we decided to separate and list the operating business as IndiGrid InvIT in 2017. We started with about 3,700 crores of AUM and two projects under that size, so large two projects with a AAA rating. And we started the listing with these two projects. Subsequent to that, we in 2018 acquired four more projects of about 1,700 crores, including from beyond Sterlite Power company called Techno Electric. And in 2019, which is the second year of operation, we got KKR and GIC to subscribe to a large preference issue, which resulted into a change in control of the manager, as we spoke about earlier, which ensured that KKR, as a large global financial institution, controls the manager now. And they also have a substantial shareholding in the InvIT itself. GIC, which is Government of Singapore, also has a substantial ownership in IndiGrid. With this capital available with us, we could acquire more projects. And as we stand today, we have about 12,000 crore projects under management, starting from 3,700 where we listed. So in 3 years, our projects that we manage have increased 3 times in size. All of them are interstate transmission projects that we own. Plus, we have signed further exclusive agreement for acquiring another 6,000 crores of transmission projects, which will take our size to about 18,000 crores. When we listed, we started with a vision of becoming the most admired yield platform coming out of Asia. And based on stable distribution, growing them, focused on corporate governance, and creating value for unit holders. So I think if we look back in last 3 years, a lot of those promises we feel we have achieved because with our goal of 30,000 crores, we're already there at 12,000 in the first 3 years with a target to be 18,000 crores of assets in hand. Our beta, which is the variability of prices on a regular basis, which also indicates volatility, is at 0.15, right? 0.15, which is one of the lowest beta of particular listed stocks that you may find in India. And our total returns, which we have provided to investors, which includes dividends that we give plus the change in price, has pretty much beaten most indices or comparable indexes as well as stocks over the last 3 years. So we have delivered a superior risk-adjusted return while maintaining a very stable distribution and a focused business model, plus growth in terms of acquiring more projects. So I think it is too early; it's just 3 years, but I think we are on track to achieve a vision, what we promised to investors some years back.
Fantastic. So Harsh, you spoke about yields. I want you to take our listeners through this concept of how the payout in an InvIT works right now, because for a mutual fund, some of us, I think most of us would probably look at the capital gains part, which is basically, you buy a mutual fund at 10 rupees, and after 10 years, you probably sell it at 20 rupees or 30 or whatever the thing is. So the primary motive there is capital gains. That is not, always the case for an InvIT. Of course, InvIT also would rise in value, but that's not how it, that's not one of the features. So could you just walk our listeners through the concept of income distribution in IndiGrid?
Okay. So I would say before I go to integrated income distribution, for any stock or an InvIT, the what is most important is total returns, which will be for any investor, that price appreciation plus dividends that one earned, right, over the period of ownership. Why is InvITs or rather IndiGrid is stable? Because majority of the total return that we offer, right, or promise or create is coming out of dividend yields, right, what we distribute. Now, what that does is that we don't keep a material amount of capital in the company for organic growth, right? Whatever we earn in terms of cash, 90% of that we have to distribute to our investor. And therefore, majority part of our returns, of total return, comes as a dividend. Unlike a normal company where the payout ratio is dependent on different opportunities and it can go up and down, in that structure like InvIT, this is a USP that majority of income you need to distribute to your investors, and that itself makes the overall total return stable, right? Because our focus is to provide stable returns. And if you compare that, let's say we are distributing 12 rupees a unit per year and 3 rupees a quarter, to beat a 12 rupees a year compounding is very, very difficult for even a normal growth company with the volatility inbuilt, right? The moment we distribute every quarter and focus on stable businesses, the volatility in the total return itself goes down, right? So I think this is the unique aspect about InvITs, that of the total return people expect of an investment, let's say people expect 15%. In a normal company, you would earn about 1-2% of dividend and hope for 13-14% of growth in some year, right?
Correct.
But you would expect that, which would also cause more beta. Whereas in an InvIT, what we project is to say, look, 12% is going to come in form of dividend, and yes, 2-3% may grow, right? As we grow our dividend. So our proposition is slightly reversed, that we are largely dependent on providing total returns by paying dividends. And therefore, I mean, if at all we were to compare, we will compare more than mutual fund with the dividend yielding stocks, right?
Yeah. So I was actually going to just come to that, right? Because when you say that, you've got a dividend yield of 12%, I would be the first guy to get up and say, just give me that straight away, because what am I getting? I'm getting, I don't know, forget FD, so usko chhod do. You look at sovereign 10-year bond yields would now be in the range of 6%. So if you're giving me, you're giving me almost double that, I have to ask you that what asset in India can give you that much yield? Because
Okay. So I would just slightly correct myself there. So the 12% is a pre-tax one, right? So now
So I just put a note for the listeners. Yeah, just listeners, a very big note. We are talking of indicative stuff out here. There is nothing guaranteed here. Please listen to this massive disclaimer out here. There is nothing guaranteed. We are talking about a capital market listed instrument, so there are no guarantees out here. We are talking of indicative yields, which could be up one day, down one day. Who knows how it goes? My question to Harsh was generally that, optically that number looks very high. So what I wanted to know is that what assets actually could generate these kind of yields, right? It could be 8%, 10%, 12%, could be even 3%. So don't go by the number, folks. Understand the concept of how a business generates that much of dividend that then gets distributed. I hope I've clarified that.
Yes, thank you. So to answer your question directly, what happens is, Anupam, when InvITs were launched, there was one tax incentive which were provided to InvITs, which is very unique. To say that India has 1.5 taxation, right? You pay a corporate tax and then you pay a dividend distribution tax. Now that is gone, but the investor will pay dividend distribution tax in their hands, right? So India had a 1.5 taxation regime. However, for InvITs, there was an exemption. Okay, InvITs are a pass-through entity, and therefore they themselves, what they earn out of their investment in the subsidiary, don't pay tax. What that creates is an ease of taking out money from the infrastructure projects and paying in the hands of investors. Yes, investors do pay tax in their hands, but that simplifies and reduces the tax uncertainty as well as tax inefficiency from the EBITDA of an infrastructure SPV to the bank account of an investor, right? So it's a more tax efficient way to earn the yield out of the investment. And this is one reason why the pre-tax yields are higher, because the assets are generating better yield. The second reason is also that India does not have deep enough penetration of REITs and InvITs yet. And why is that important? Globally, the difference between, as you rightly picked up, the GSEC and a pre-tax yield of an InvIT or a REIT is about 200 to 250 basis points, right? Because most of them are investment grade ratings and from the country's rating, and still they trade about 250 basis points higher, right? Yeah. In India, the spread is much higher, right? Even for a AAA rated InvIT today, the spread is 600 basis points, right? So, because it is not understood widely yet and not widely owned yet. Now, we believe that as more and more InvITs come, as more investors get to know about it, overall this gap may reduce, because as you rightly got it, it's not logical to have such a large yield gap. So in comparison to a GSEC, especially when you have so much of regulation and governance playing around in operating asset, AAA rating, and higher unit holder rights, the spread should have been lower. Even if you look at dividend yielding stocks in the country, right, with 12% pre-tax, post-tax 8-9% dividend yield, you'll not find many companies in that bucket, right, in terms of listed and liquid. So I would say there is a way to go in terms of investors to understand this, appreciate the risk better, and own more, which will eventually reduce the yield gap and probably result in price appreciation.
Okay, I want to understand the dividend history concept out here, okay, because you said that 90% is by mandate has to be distributed to the unit holders. But these are businesses. There are probably good years and bad years, and obviously something like a transmission business has much lower volatility than, say, a trading business or a commodity business or a cyclical business. Can you just tell our listeners the concept of distribution of dividend from the InvIT to us as a unit holder? What's been the track record? And, theoretically, are there possibilities of no dividend being declared in a quarter or in a year?
Okay, good. So I would first explain the formula. The formula is, which is public and again mandated by SEBI, the cash earned during the year, right? Basically, after adjusting working capital or other things, whatever cash that is earned, 90% of that needs to be distributed to its investors. So now what that does is that whatever business we run, whatever we generate, we need to distribute. Now that's same for all. Now comes the difference. As I said earlier, InvIT is just a platform. The differentiation comes from the business that you own. We own transmission utility, which has got availability based contracts, long term contracts with fixed price. So we can fairly predict our cash flows that is going to be even in the 30th year from now. Okay? The only change being our interest cost and probably working capital. And both of them are manageable. Interest cost, because we try to take long-term loans, we try to fix our rates, and therefore we don't see a short-term volatility on that. But there are different businesses out there within infrastructure domain, right? May not be trading, but different infrastructure business. For example, let's say a toll road, right? Now, a toll road, the volumes may differ, the price may differ, the toll price may differ. It can go up, it can come down, right? It's both ways. So
yeah, we could see a time like today when traffic is totally stopped.
Yeah, it's coming back hopefully, but yeah.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah.
I would say it goes back to what investor wants to own. If your business, if the business of InvIT is GDP linked business, right? Be it a port or an airport or a road or a commercial real estate, you are bound to have volatility as well as probably growth over the period of time as the things grow, and which will have volatility plus growth go hand in hand. For businesses which are non-GDP linked, let's say like annuity road projects or transmission line projects, you will have lesser volatility in terms of even predicted volatility in terms of return and quarter-on-quarter changes, right? So the volatility and risk of dividend not being there is completely dependent on the type of business the InvIT is owning, right? And our implications of that. We being owning a take-or-pay contracts and long-term transmission project, we have far more visibility and therefore we can give long-term guidance in which we give. Going to the track record, I think we have now about 12 quarters of track record since listing, and we have distributed about 33.56 rupees. The first few quarters being at about 2.75, and subsequently we have been distributing 3 rupees a unit. So SEBI requires us to distribute minimum semi-annually. We have undertaken a quarterly distribution policy, which probably provides a better yield and predictability to investors, and again reduces volatility. So we have I would say now 3 years of track record of distribution, where we've not had a single quarter where there is a surprise. And hopefully we'll be able to continue that. And even during the COVID scenario over the last 3 months, we could fairly survive and in a good shape. So we did not face difficulty, and we did distribute 3 rupees a quarter of quarter 4 as well to our investors.
Sure. So now last question, Harsh. What I would say is the important one, because it's, Integrated InvIT is a listed entity. I think the price is going at some 101 rupees. So if, when you say 3 rupees a quarter, 3 fours are 12 rupees, 12 rupees a year divided by the price of 101. Very simplistically, that gives a very high dividend yield of 12%. But, that again could possibly fluctuate. I wanted to, explain to our listeners about the concept of the core NAV, the price, and what are the chances of this price that we see on the NSE? When I'm seeing the National Stock Exchange, the listed price for the integrated, it says as 101, but then you also have the NAV, of the trust. Same concept in a mutual fund again. And in some cases, both might go in different directions, because ultimately the listed stock price is a function of buying and selling, whereas the NAV is a function of the assets. So could you just walk our listeners through what exactly is the price, NAV, any differences, liquidity, stuff like that?
Yeah. So I think, as you rightly captured, NAV is nothing but a net asset value and represents an intrinsic value of the asset owned by the trust using largely discounting of the future cash flows, right? So it is a reference value. It is NAV calculation as well as reports are made public on a quarter-on-quarter or semi-annual basis to investors to evaluate how that is arrived. But at the end of the day, it is a discounting method of future cash flows to come to a particular number and acts as a reference price. However, what you see on the exchange getting traded at a listed price is, as you rightly put in, is a buy and sell. And therefore, the better the liquidity, the better the price would be, or rather, narrow the margin from intrinsic value will be, right? Typically, what NAV will not capture is softer aspects, right? In terms of quality of governance, quality of disclosures, liquidity, those kind of factors, because it is a valuation done on paper while disclosed, but in real world, investor may look at it differently based on corporate governance, based on track record, perception, liquidity, a lot of other factors, right? So I would say NAV is a good reference for investors to look at, that you're not making a very big mistake. But NAV is not necessarily the number on which the investment decision should be made, right? It is a reference price, that if somebody was to value this on an intrinsic basis, somebody independent, this is how somebody will value it. Like an equity research report or an independent valuer, the way they are looking at the business and the outlook. So NAV should take input in terms of evaluation by investors, but that by no means is the measure of decision making, right? Because there are liquidity factors, there are perception factors, there are many other softer aspects. So in the theoretical ideal world, they should be same, but the listed market is not the ideal world always. So there may be discrepancies between the two because of these factors.
Understood. And the NAV is not declared every day, right? Like, because unlike a mutual fund, NAV which is declared each and every day, for an InvIT, you're saying it's only once a quarter.
Yes, the reason being mutual fund owns listed securities, so it's just an Excel.
Correct.
For us, we own unlisted infrastructure assets, so every day nothing changes.
Yeah, totally forgot about that. Okay, Harsh, last question. Given the kind of investment that an InvIT is, and we'll just talk generically now rather than for IndiGrid specifically. For two things. One is, what are the unique features, and two, because of those unique features, how should one look upon it as an investment opportunity? As part of, say, asset allocation or stuff like that. Because an InvIT is very, very unique. It's got a lot of positives that I see. I could probably compare it to maybe a debt mutual fund or a very stable asset, which gives me a stable income. So from your perspective, how would you look upon it, as either an asset allocation thing or an investor profile thing, whichever way you look at it?
Yeah, sure. So I would say, our value proposition to investors is to own IndiGrid for stable income by owning stable assets for a very long period of time, and it will grow with growth opportunities as we see along the way. But majority of our returns, as I promised, as I spoke about, that is going to be delivered to our investor in form of a dividend income or a distribution income, which will distribute on a quarterly basis, right? So I believe that it should make a very important asset allocation decision for investors, because what InvITs offer is a very large gap that exists in India today between a debt, which is kind of safe with a very low yield. I mean, safe if you own AAA with a very low yield, to an equity, which is fairly volatile, may return in higher returns, right? It's a may return. So there is, in between that, there are very limited opportunities for investors to own platforms and assets in a very easier way. So I would say we play in between the two, where we largely offer probably better than debt market returns or better than GSEC returns, and deliver much, much lower volatility than a stock market, right, or a similar stock. So for investors to have low risk and moderate returns, this should be the strategy in part of their allocation to allocate capital. Again, long-term compounding is something one should keep in mind, because we are distributing on a quarterly basis, and which reduces volatility of returns over longer term basis. Because once, let's say, you own an InvIT for 5 years, right? And if you distribute 12 rupees for 5 years, you already earned 60 rupees, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And therefore, you don't need the price to be necessarily going to 160 But even at hybrid, you want decent returns, right?
Yeah.
Whereas in a normal equity market for the same business, you would expect it to be at 160. It may or may not be because of market conditions, political conditions, economy, several things. So just by virtue of distributing higher distribution, by owning it for a longer period of time, we are reducing volatility and creating a better returns for investors. So I think it does deserve a very important place in asset allocation for investors. And I believe historically it has not taken place because in India, large part of our capital, right, our personal savings has gone either into bank FDs or into insurance and pension funds, and who themselves have invested into government bonds, right? So, which has resulted into a high savings into low debt instruments as a market, whereas globally, the banks do not offer you such interest rates, right? So you are incentivized to invest into something which is more productive, and you don't have intermediaries to make decision on your behalf, right? Which is kind of a better definition of efficient financial markets. Yes. And investors end up choosing in investing directly owning real assets, be it their own road, their own port, their own airport, everything, which in the longer term results in better liquidity, better investor returns for themselves, as well as better financial system. Right? Yeah. So I think that's a loophole. I mean, it's too early to talk about it's going to transform, entire financing structure. But what has happened globally can happen in India is rather already happening in India, right? If you look at savings rate and bank financing today, the FD have come down to 5%, right? And its savings rate have come down to 2%. And at least in my lifetime, in my professional career, I haven't seen that period over the last 20 years. So investor would need to go out and invest into so-called risky assets beyond banks and government bonds. And when they invest that as part of their asset allocation, InvITs and REITs will play a very important role to offer that stable return which can replace their earlier investment avenues.
Oh yeah, I really hope the concept catches on, whether it's an InvIT or a REIT. The entire concept of having, of owning such a critical asset from an infrastructure perspective, whether it is, a real estate building or it is a port or it is a road, and doing it via this medium of having a very professional company and a diversified pool of assets and distributing 90%. I mean, come on, as a concept, I'm already sold. And it works on both sides, right, Harsh? Because you've got a very long-term funding route for the projects and you've got a very interesting asset from the point of investment. So I think it's a win-win situation. I hope that the government also and SEBI also kind of, eases the way for more of these InvITs or REITs to list, because God knows the REIT took a really long time. Listed, I think, only last year or the year before last. And that has also got a very good response. So I just hope that this catches on. Folks, that is a wrap on this very, very special episode of Paisa Vaisa, the InvIT special, the Infrastructure Investment Trust special. I'm really thrilled. Harsh, thank you so much. You're the first InvIT on Paisa Vaisa. You've explained this in a really nice and clear manner to our listeners. I wish you guys all the best. And folks, that is a wrap on Paisa Vaisa. Harsh, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Anupam, and thank you, everyone.
If you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on IVM Network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on social media. We are IVM Podcasts on Twitter and on Instagram. And if you want to reach out to me, I'm B50 on Twitter. Thank you for listening to Paisa Vaisa.
No material on the show should be considered as financial advice. The material on the show is for informational purposes only. Please consult a financial advisor before taking any investment decision.
Do you wish you were smarter? Well, so do we. But the next best thing?
We could make you sound smarter.
And to help you with this endeavor, we are Simplified, a podcast that attempts to break down the complex world around you with a little knowledge, a lot of poor jokes, and a ton of random trivia.
Episodes out every Monday
on the IVM Podcast app or wherever you get your podcasts.
See ya!
Namaskar, this is Ashish Vidyarthi. Yes, my friend, these are challenging times, but in these challenging times, we can create something extraordinary. Do take time to listen to my podcast, Begin the Journey. Available on the IVM Podcast, website, app, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Remember, we have a great opportunity called life. Cheers.